This is the season of repair, a time to reflect on how we might endure when life tears at us. We are held by the great book of life, in which it is written that we will inevitably face deprivation and discomfort, longing and forgiveness. Each among us must contemplate our own place in it all. As those of us in relationship with Judaism mark the high holy days, our hearts fill with hope and with fear, of turning and settling, of mystery and agency, accountability and acceptance. Let us gather today in somber celebration of our shared humanity and our personal power. Come, friends, let us worship together. Together in truth, oh come together in peace, oh come together in joy and sharing, come together in knowing and caring, come together, oh come together in love. Now please rise in body or in spirit for our opening hymn, number 52, In Sweet Fields of Autumn. Now I invite forward Becca Cornett to lead us in our responsive reading.
Our reading this morning is number 634 toward the back of the gray hymnal. Now is the time for turning. The birds are beginning to turn and are heading once more toward the south. For leaves, birds, and animals, turning comes instinctively. It takes an act of will for us to make a turn. It means breaking with old habits. It means losing face. It means starting all over again, and this is always painful. It means recognizing that we have the ability to change. These things are hard to do. God, help us to turn from callousness to sensitivity, from hostility to love, from pettiness to purpose, from envy to contentment, from carelessness to discipline, from fear to faith. Revive our lives as at the beginning.
Recently, I went on an early morning bike ride. It's one of those mornings when the air was crisp and just a bit of frost covered the grass. There was just the beginnings of those brilliant oranges and reds on the maple trees. That light that caught the morning sun. And there was this raucous V-shaped procession of geese across the cloudless sky. It was one of those magic mornings, those times that awaken our souls. Well, I made it to one of my favorite spots overlooking the salt marshes there along Quincy Bay. All was resting. All was silent except for those few birds calling to their mates across the bay. Or maybe they were just singing with the sheer joy of being alive. The rest of the day, of course, would be filled with activity, of people frantically rushing from one place to the next. But for now, early in that morning, the world seemed to be resting, quiet, a space where the soul could reside, a space where God might be waiting. You know, every autumn as the Jewish New Year begins, we honor the High Holy Days, a period of time in which observant Jews review what has happened in the preceding year and ask forgiveness for the ways in which they might have missed the mark. As Unitarian Universalists, we share historic bonds and common values with our Jewish siblings, and we're grateful for the rich and ancient tradition that has so much to teach us. You know, one of the stories told by the rabbis is of the young prince who left his father's house and wandered through the world until he found himself in a distant land. One day, messengers arrived from his father, urging him to come back home. The king's son replied, "I would like to return, but I fear the journey is too long for me." Well, the messengers responded, "Thus saith your father, come back as far as you can, and I will go to meet you the rest of the way." This, say the rabbis, is the meaning of the prophetic summons. Return to me, and I will return unto you. For returning to God is the central theme of the Jewish High Holy Days. In another one of the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur readings at the back of our hymnal, it's actually number 635, Rabbi Chaim Stern says, "Who can say, I have purified my heart? And am I free from sin? There are none on earth so righteous that they never sin. Cast away all the evil you have done and get yourself a new heart and a new spirit." And then Rabbi Stern speaks out of his tradition in God's voice when he says, "A new heart will I give you, a new spirit put within you. I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh and give you a heart that feels. For thus says the eternal God, I myself will search for my sheep and seek them out. As a shepherd seeks them out when any of the flock go astray, so will I seek out my sheep. I will put my spirit within you and teach you to live by my laws. For I desire love and not sacrifices, the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings." Rabbi Stern tells us that the God of his tradition is a God that not only waits in the stillness, but a God who actually searches for those who have gone astray, just as a shepherd might look for sheep who have gone astray. A God who not only waits, who will not only is there to meet you halfway, but a God who actively searches for those who've gone astray. All of those who may be lost. In the book, When God Talks Back, written by T.M. Luhrmann, a psychological anthropologist at Stanford University, Professor Luhrmann grew up as a Unitarian Universalist, but was fascinated with evangelicals who consider God to be their best friend, someone who loves them unconditionally, someone with whom they can share their most intimate thoughts, someone who listens and sometimes even answers. You know, there's something intriguing to me about the possibility of this God who actively searches out for those who have gone astray, for those who may be lost. A God who wants us to return to that which is most holy. There's something about this theology that speaks to me on a very deep level, even if somehow I can't fully embrace it. See, over the years, I've felt lost at times. There have been times when I felt alone, abandoned, in despair, and at some level, yearning for someone or something to come searching for me and to actually find me. Perhaps some of you have had a similar experience. In Luhrmann's book, there is a case study of a church where people are actually taught a new theory of mind in which they can learn how to listen for God's voice. I began to realize that perhaps what they are experiencing might not be as alien as I first assumed. To be honest, God has never talked back to me. But I have had times when I experienced a presence in my life, when it has felt that I am being gently guided, when all is just right with me and the world. Those times when I'm flooded with gratitude and with joy and all the blessings that surround me. That's how I felt that morning, that early morning bike ride. See, to be perfectly honest, I am by nature a skeptic, someone who often doubts the reality of God. And yet, over and over again throughout my life, there seems to be an almighty something that doesn't give up on me, someone who keeps asking me to return. One of the passages from the Torah being considered during these days of awe is this one from the book of Genesis. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. And the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." Jacob said, please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. Wrestling with God, struggling with God, doubting the very existence of something holy that transcends us. It's ancient, and it seems universal. Professor Luhrmann writes this about faith-filled Christians who also surprisingly doubt the reality of God when she writes this. In earlier centuries, before atheism became a cultural possibility, they may have struggled more about the nature of the supernatural than about whether the supernatural existed at all. But they struggled. Augustine agonized. Anselm despaired. The long tradition of spiritual literature is full of intense uncertainty about the true nature of a being that can be neither seen nor heard in the ordinary way, and whether or not people ever voice the fear that God is an empty fantasy, whether or not they tussle with theology. Christians of all ages have wrestled with the difficulty of believing that God is real. The idea of believers struggling with doubt can be disconcerting to skeptics, who tend to imagine belief as an either-or choice, and who imagine that a good Christian, or I might add a good Jew, has a straightforward commitment to God's reality. When you are willing to take seriously the importance of doubt, you can see it everywhere in Christianity, and I would also add within Judaism as well. You know, when my grandmother, a church-going Christian, a Methodist, her whole life was nearing the end of her life, we had this talk about God. To my surprise, she talked not about her steadfast faith, but about all of those doubts that she had, all these doubts she had harbored her entire life. I guess it's in this doubting that helps to keep us more honest, more centered in the limits of what we can know, acknowledging the ways in which we see through a glass darkly, as the Apostle Paul said thousands of years ago. And so, in the meantime, we have this time between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur when Jews are to acknowledge all the ways in which they might have missed the mark, fallen short, sinned. And then they are to ask for forgiveness, not from God, but from the person who they harmed. It is when they have a clean slate that their names will be entered into the book of life once again. And so, friends, as this new year begins, let us pause to consider how things have been in our lives in the year preceding. Have there been things that we've done that we feel regret about? Are there things that we need to apologize for, seek forgiveness for? Are there things we wish to do differently? Are we in right relationship with our families and our friends and communities of support? Are we caring enough about the world in which we live? Are we helping to make a difference in some way? Are we tending our own souls with enough tenderness and compassion so that we can know joy and gratitude for our lives? Are we able to forgive ourselves when all those times happen when we fall short? You know, it's traditional to include in a Yom Kippur service a prayer, a Kol Nidre, in which the vows made the previous year, all of the oaths that have been made are disavowed. This is done in order to acknowledge that, good as our intentions may be, we will fall short. And therefore, the Kol Nidre releases us from those vows, those oaths, so that we will be free to begin again. So in closing, I would like to share with you an adaptation of the traditional Kol Nidre that was written by my colleague, the Reverend Mark Bellatini. We vowed not so long ago to live lives that added, not subtracted. We promised not so long ago to live lives that matched our words. Lives not hard and brittle with anger, but soft with letting go. We made an oath not so long ago to live lives that reached for the stars and did not consist of strings of little disappointments or fragments of the shattered dreams we once used as mirrors to see how good we looked. The days have flown quickly, and they will flow quickly in the year to come. Circumstance, stress, and brokenness come to all. It is the human condition. And thus I say, before the witness of the blue sky bending above, and before the nodding blue chicory flowers of early autumn, still growing here below, and before the clear eyes of children not yet born, children who will inherit the world from us, that all the vows we make, not long from now, all the promises we will make, all the unspoken oaths we will declare are hereby canceled, annulled, voided, and made unbinding. We are free not to promise to be good, but simply to get on with loving each other. We are free not to vow great transformation, but to engage life with tenderness and understanding and outpourings of kindness. We are free not to swear oaths of everlasting loyalty and righteousness, but to continue to be generous to each other, to ourselves, and to the common good. At the start of this new year, we begin again in love. So may it be. Amen.